Main event of the evening.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today, we will be discussing Season 5, Episode 21, Our Gang.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Our Gang.
We open at Arnold's, where a high school pep rally is being held in the parking lot.
Go, go, go! Beat Mandeville! Beat Mandeville! Yeah!
The place is empty except for Al when Richie comes in. He's picking up the instruments for his band. They're performing at the annual Leopard Lodge Poo-Pah Doo-Dah Dance. Say that 5 times fast. Joni, in her cheer uniform, handsprings out of the bathroom and runs out to join the rally.
Well, they can't start without me.
Right as Chachi comes in. Much to Richie and Al's horror, he's wearing a gang jacket. Chachi's excited. His first day with the Lords, the best gang in town, and they're going to have a rumble tonight. Al is disgusted.
Those gangs are tough. I mean, they got bad reputations.
And when Chachi offers to make Arnold's the Lord's new hangout, he says he doesn't want that kind of business. He storms off, and a confused Chachi asks Richie what his problem with gangs is. Richie makes Chachi sit down and scolds him for joining a gang. Chachi protests that Fonzie was in a gang, the Falcons, and he's doing fine. He was even their leader. Richie says Fonzie quit.
I thought they just retired his jacket.
Since Chachi doesn't know the whole story, Richie sits him down and tells him the story of how he and Fonzie first met. 3.5 years ago, on the first day of Richie's sophomore year of high school, Richie and Potsy went to Arnold's for the first time.
I've been waiting all my life to come here. This is Arnold's.
Marcia returns as the waitress who sasses them when they order their meal.
Sophomores. Cute.
Another boy strolls in. Richie doesn't know him, but Potsy does. The boy strolls up to them and does his Arthur Godfrey impression.
How are you? How are you? How are you?
And Potsy introduces him as Mouth Ralph.
Strike that. Reverse it.
Ralph Mouth. And then another boy arrives. A biker. No, worse than that.
A child. No.
A Falcon. Yes, it's none other than Fonzie. He approaches Richie, Potsy, and Ralph's table, and stares at them as Richie awkwardly says hi and tries to hide his lunchbox. Fonzie snaps his fingers, summoning another Falcon, who says that 3 nerds are sitting at the Fonz's booth. He offers to beat them up.
What do you want me to do to him, huh? Some free dental work, maybe?
And Ralph runs away. Richie asks why they can't sit there, and Fonzie speaks for the first time.
Falcon turf.
It's even been carved on the table, real small, by Fonzie himself.
With that nail.
Richie says this whole situation is full of malarkey, and gets challenged to a fight. Fonzie asks who his warlord is, and Potsy says he is, upon hearing that the warlord makes the arrangements and doesn't fight. Richie protests that he can't stay out after 9 on school nights.
Doesn't your mommy and your daddy let you stay out on Saturday night?
So the fight is scheduled for the alley on Saturday night at 9. No weapons. The Fonz doesn't need them. After the 2 Falcons leave, Potsy remarks on how coming to Arnold's was worth waiting for. First time there and he's a warlord! Richie tells him to sit on it. Saturday night at the Cunningham house. Howard is fiddling with the television set.
Well, Marion, we're finally going to get rid of the snow on this television set.
He asked Richie if he has a date tonight. Richie says he was supposed to meet a guy, but he probably won't go. As he helps his dad with the TV, he makes up a story about an extremely nice guy he knows who was challenged to a fight with a hood over a table. Howard says if eating at the table is important to this guy, he should fight for what he believes in. Richie decides his father is right and sets out.
Yeah, you're right, Dad. And I'm gonna fight him. Thanks.
All right.
When he arrives in the alley, he's spooked by a cat and stumbles into some trash cans. That's when Potsy and Ralph arrive. They have a plan to ambush Fonzie, but Richie doesn't like the idea of 3 against 1.
Oh, I think that's worse than the Falcons. Let's do it anyway.
He's deeply grateful to them for trying to help, though, and thanks them. He still has to handle this fight alone, and Ralph and Potsy leave without much convincing. After more waiting, Richie assumes Fonzie isn't going to show up. The sound of a finger snap tells him he's wrong. Fonzie is impressed that Richie showed up at all. 3 of his other fights tonight didn't.
Well, that would be rude.
He also had a rumble today with the Red Devils, because one of the Devils bumped into a Falcon on the bus. Richie isn't impressed, and Fonzie protests that they fight for a lot of good reasons. Like if someone looks at Lefty's girl, or reads magazines at the Falcon's candy store. Richie still isn't impressed. Richie tries to get the fight over with, goading Fonzie by asking if he thinks he's tough because of the Falcon jacket. Fonzie takes his jacket and cap off. Richie feigns having a gun for a moment.
All right, you asked for it? You just bought it, buddy.
and says that next time, Fonzie might not be so lucky.
What happens if you run into some dark alley? Some maniac with a real gun instead of a prompt kid with a quick finger.
What happens if someone finds Fonzie dead in a gutter, all because of a fight stemming from one dumb slight? Why is Fonzie even in a gang? Because he's cool, according to Fonzie. Richie agrees that Fonzie is cool, but all those other guys, they're only cool because of Fonzie. They're using him. Fonzie, frustrated, hits the wall, and every light in the building turns on. Fonzie explains to the amazed Richie that it's a gift. Fonzie taps Richie on the chin and says he's got a lot of guts, and Fonzie likes that. He offers Richie a ride home. He's not taking his jacket or his cap. He doesn't need them or the Falcons to be cool. He claims to Richie he's been thinking about leaving for a while, actually. The two boys introduce themselves to each other as they leave together.
You call me the Fawn.
Great, you can call me Richie.
Whoa.
Back in the present day, Chachi is unmoved by Richie's story
It's your story, Cunningham, but I gotta run.
and leaves for the Rumble. Fonzie arrives, having heard what Chachi is up to, and furious at his cousin. Richie says they had a long talk, and urges Fonzie that Chachi has to make up his own mind.
Hey, he can make up his own mind.
If he makes it wrong, I'm going to tie his eyebrows together.
The assembled lords come back in. Chachi is given his very own chains for the Rumble. He also finds out that the Rumble is over one of the lords having had his foot stepped on. Chachi returns the chains, the jacket, and the cap, and quits the lords. When one of the lords threatens him,
Nobody quits the Lords. Not unless they want to go out on a stretcher, so come on!
Chachi taps him on the chin and says he's got a lot of guts. That doesn't dissuade the lords, but Fonzie standing up for Chachi does, and the assembled lords leave. Al tells Chachi he did the right thing, and he's a good boy. Fonzie suggests that he, Richie, and Chachi go watch the pep rally, not because Fonzie cares about sports, but because he cares about cheerleaders. Cheerleaders who, I remind you, are in high school.
I get older, they stay the same age.
Richie and Chachi are not creeped out by this.
Thank you, Peter. That was Our Gang, which first aired back on February 21st, 1978. That night, Happy Days served as the lead into a brand new Laverne and Shirley, in which the girls try to help Squiggy pass his driving test. CBS had another installment of Celebrity Challenge of the Sexes. This episode featured our very own Donnie Most versus Adrienne Barbeau in racquetball, plus Pat Harrington and Elkie Summer in an obstacle course. And NBC aired the third installment of a miniseries called The Awakening Land with Hal Holbrook and Elizabeth Montgomery.
I hear it's fine living on the open prairie by the English lakes.
Based on a trilogy of novels by Conrad Richter, the series follows a young woman who travels with her family from Pennsylvania to the unsettled Ohio Valley, where they struggle each day to survive. So, what are you watching?
This is a tough one. I love Elizabeth Montgomery, but I also want to see Adrienne Barbeau beat Donnie Most at racquetball. And I know she's going to beat him because, come on, Donnie Most, I like you, but my money is on Adrienne Barbeau in this case.
Would it sell you on The Awakening Land at all if I were to tell you that there's a cholera outbreak in episode 3?
Yeah, I'm watching that.
Our Gang was directed by the one and only Jerry Paris, and it was written by Brian Levant. Brian previously wrote Hardcover and AKA The Fonz. Again, Brian went on to be a major Hollywood producer-director with films like Snow Dogs, Are We There Yet, and The Flintstones. To his credit. As for guest stars this week, we have the return and farewell of Beatrice Colin as Marcia Sims.
Marcia Sims returns!
Beatrice went on to appear on Barney Miller, Too Close for Comfort, The Wonder Years, and Baywatch. Her final acting job was a 1997 episode of The Secret World of Alex Mack.
Miss Mack, would you care to share your thoughts with the entire class?
She does not get an on-screen credit for this episode.
But we know it's her. It's something for all the Marcia superfans out there, of which we are too.
She does get a special round of applause when she makes her entrance. So what did you think of the final appearance of Beatrice Colin as Marcia Sims?
It's not much, but she gets to sass Richie and Potsy for one last time.
What would you suggest?
Ordering before I lose my patience.
You know what? I think that's great.
I thought it was great, too. I kind of wish she had had maybe a longer scene or a more elaborate scene, but it was nice seeing her for a few minutes. Also returning is Daryl Morey as Monk. He previously played a very similar character called Leroy in Joni's Weird Boyfriend. He'll play a couple more characters on Happy Days and will also be a regular on Joni Loves Chachi. I'll always know him best, though, as the murderous David in Massacre at Central High.
Welcome to Central High, where the kids really get away with murder.
what did you think of Daryl Morey as Monk?
Yeah, he looks like a guy who could convincingly play a murderer. I don't mean to be rude, but some people just have a certain vibe, and I'm sure he put that vibe that he has to good use.
He made a career out of looking very threatening and creepy, and I think he does that very well. So the threat seems to be real when Daryl Morey steps into the scene. And on a very similar note, we have David Reaney as Iggy, the leader of the Lords. David was an Ohio actor who scored a handful of TV and screen roles in the late 70s and early 80s before becoming a manager. You might have seen him on Policewoman or Fantasy Island, and he has a small role in Neil Simon's California Suite. Peter, what did you think of Iggy?
He also had a certain vibe. I did believe that he was absolutely going to kick Chachi's ass. Or he would have if Fonzie hadn't gotten him to stand down.
Yeah, there seems to be a moment when Chachi is in some genuine trouble and David Reaney is about to kill him, and then Fonzie steps in and saves him. I think David Reaney does play that role very effectively. I've noticed Happy Days has a definite template for its gang characters. They all kind of dress like somebody out of Sha Na Na or The Village People. They often have these vaguely Italian American accents or New York accents, and they say things like, well, what do we have here? A couple of tough guys.
Yeah,
and
they're very cartoonish.
as for songs, you're going to have to help me out, Peter, because there were no songs in my copy of the episode. I'm pretty sure one of them is supposed to be Rock Around the Clock.
There was one song in my version of the episode, and it was indeed Rock Around the Clock. When Richie first arrives at Arnold's, Rock Around the Clock is playing as a bunch of teens are dancing together, and Richie is looking amazed at the drive-in.
The fake music that they put in has the same basic rhythm and structure of Rock Around the Clock. As for cultural and historical references, this episode takes its title from the Our Gang series of theatrical shorts created by producer Hal Roach. The series ran from 1922 to 1944 and spanned 220 shorts and one feature. The films were later repackaged for television as The Little Rascals.
Believe me, if all those endearing young charms.
Do you have any relationship to the Little Rascals? Did you watch them? Were you familiar with them?
I was aware of their existence, but that was as much as I knew about them as a child.
There is no Mandeville High School in Wisconsin. Mandeville is in Louisiana. Previously, Jefferson High's sports rivals had been Madison and Oshkosh. Joni's cheer, "See the basket, see the ball, come on stupid, hit the wall," does appear to be a real chant from real basketball games. It is said when the opposing team is shooting free throws. An alternate wording is, "There's the basket, there's the wall." There is quite a lot of 50s slang in this episode. We get rumble, Clyde, Made in the Shade, malarkey, and keen. That stuff used to be way more prominent on Happy Days. They really stepped it up for this episode.
They really did.
Nostalgia for nostalgia, or meta-nostalgia almost.
Yeah, the nostalgia snake is eating its own nostalgia tail.
Richie has a Wild Bill Hickok lunchbox, the real-life Old West lawman and gunfighter, at a popular TV show based on his life from 1951 to 1958, starring Guy Madison as Wild Bill and Andy Devine as his sidekick Jingles.
Wild Bill Hickok! Starring Guy Madison as Wild Bill Hickok. Hey! Wild Bill, wait for me! And Andy Devine as his pal Jingle.
Both characters appeared on a 1956 lunchbox manufactured by Aladdin. They can go for a couple $100 these days, especially if you have the matching thermos. A copy of this lunchbox is in the Smithsonian, so if you're ever at the Smithsonian visiting Fonzie's jacket, you can stop by and see the Wild Bill Hickok lunchbox as well. We've talked about Arthur Godfrey and his catchphrase, "How are ya, how are ya, how are ya," before.
Well, how are ya, how are ya, how are ya? Gee whiz, it's a nice day.
The red-haired ukulele strumming broadcaster from New York was a major star in TV and radio in the 1950s, with 2 shows running on CBS, but his popularity soon declined by the 1960s. Tootsie Rolls are also mentioned by Potsy.
I haven't had a Tootsie Roll in 3 years.
Tootsie Rolls have been manufactured in America since 1907. They were the invention of an Austrian immigrant named Leo Hirschfeld, who named the sticky chocolate candy in honor of his daughter Clara, a.k.a. Tootsie Hirschfeld.
Aww.
The iconic Tootsie Roll jingle, however, did not debut until 1976.
Whatever it is, I think I see becomes a Tootsie Roll to me.
have you heard the jingle, the Tootsie Roll song?
I had not.
It's pretty famous. I could not find an exact origin for the old "you wouldn't hit a guy with glasses" joke that Ralph makes.
You guys wouldn't hit a man in glasses now, would you?
But it is used by Bugs Bunny in a 1948 Looney Tunes cartoon called Hair Splitter.
You wouldn't hit a guy with glasses, would you?
As well as by many other characters in pop culture. There's a whole page at TV Tropes about you wouldn't hit a guy with glasses. And I would imagine that Ralph gets quite a lot of his material from Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
Howard says he doesn't want to miss Gleason. The Jackie Gleason Show was a weekly variety show that ran in various forms from 1952 to 1970.
How sweet it is! How sweet it is! How sweet it is!
This show was the source of many of Gleason's most famous characters, including the Poor Soul, Joe the Bartender, Reginald Van Gleason III, and of course the Honeymooners, which got its own spinoff. For most of its run, the Jackie Gleason Show aired on Saturday nights. In the alley, we see a vintage tourism poster promoting the Alamo in San Antonio, Texas, now a museum. It was once a Spanish mission and the site of a famous 1836 battle between a small group of Texas soldiers and the Mexican army. Have you ever been out there down to Texas to see the Alamo?
I have not, sadly.
I have not either, although I kind of wanted to after Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
I remember the Alamo.
There are some fake boxing posters in the alley as well. One advertises the Fresno versus Jarrow fight with Macomb versus Marlin on the undercard. Another advertises Sailor McGinnis versus Carlo Taxidor, the Basque bomber. There actually was a boxer named Sailor McGinnis back in the 1920s, but Carlo Taxidor is a fictional fighter. Other fake fighters on the posters include Ben Marrow, Buddy Fine, Gus Sharp, and Mike Mason. These same fake boxer names turn up on posters on shows like Starsky and Hutch, Mannix, Star Trek, M Squad, Batman, and the Untouchables. People on the internet have taken screenshots of all these fake boxing posters that turn up on the backgrounds of TV shows from the 60s and 70s.
Oh, wow.
Ralph mentions Randolph Scott.
You do it for Randolph Scott.
Randolph Scott.
This Virginia-born actor was a handsome Hollywood leading man of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, especially known for his many appearances in Westerns. Never considered a great actor, Scott specialized in playing strong, silent Western heroes. He retired after 1962's Ride the High Country, and I found that it is widely believed he had a long-time relationship with Cary Grant.
Oh, nice.
So other observations. This flashback episode provided some unique challenges to the cast and crew of Happy Days. For one thing, Tom Bosley's hair had gone gray since season 1.
My gray hair makes me feel so old. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna wash that gray right out of my hair. I'm gonna wash that gray right out of my hair.
Instead of dyeing it or having him wear a wig, they opted for a ball cap. What did you think of that?
I kind of loved it. It was very obvious why they were doing it, but I was amused by it.
Joni had to be left out of the flashback altogether since Erin Moran looked so different than she had in season 1, and no suitable lookalikes could be found. How old is Joni supposed to be in season 1?
She's 12. Remember Spike's incredibly creepy line about how she had the figure of a 13-year-old?
Oh, God. Yeah. Thanks, Peter, for bringing that up.
I'm sorry.
I did not like the fact that Al was excluded from the Leopard Lodge Poopa Doodah dance.
I'm not allowed. I don't have enough spots yet.
Yeah. That's mean of them.
This might have been a miscommunication between the costume department and the writers, but Richie, you don't have to look at the back of Chachi's jacket. It says Lords in giant yellow letters right on the front. That bothered me as well. He makes Chachi turn around so he can read the back of the jacket.
Maybe he just wanted to be sure.
Speaking of which, we get another Chachi this week and a Wah Wah Wah, and we also get a Bucko. Happy Days has been on long enough now that it's able to look back at the show it used to be. Our gang, to me, was basically Happy Days cosplaying as itself or its former self. We even get appearances by the Magnets and the Assorted Nuts, who have largely been forgotten.
It's nostalgia for nostalgia.
Yeah.
It's nostalgiaception.
And Ralph's t-shirt with his name on it is a throwback to earlier times as well. And I realized, boy, he hasn't worn that in a while.
Yeah, he's grown out of it. I didn't realize how much I missed it.
Who was running Arnold's back in season 1? It's not the Arnold that we know from season 3. It must be the previous guy.
The mysterious pre-Arnold. Speaking of minor anachronisms, in this episode, Ralph is portrayed as the jokester that he would become later on.
Who's the kid with the gum on his face?
He's a new kid in my homeroom. Just moved in from across town. He's a funny guy. You're gonna love him.
Yeah?
Yeah. Hey,
when in season 1 he was more of the cool guy that Richie and Potsy kind of envied because he had a car and he had better luck with girls. And there's also the fact that the ending shows Richie and Fonzie becoming friends when in season 1 they weren't quite friends yet and it took them a while to get there. I don't think it's necessarily a flaw in the episode though, because Richie is likely being an unreliable narrator. Maybe he's deliberately changing certain details so as not to have to explain too much to Chachi, or he's just misremembering it accidentally.
How does Richie know what alley Fonzie means by the alley?
The alley, Saturday night, 10 o'clock.
There must be a lot of alleys in Milwaukee, and it's not the alley behind Arnold's.
Maybe he just wandered around for most of the night until he found the right one.
I guess so.
And they just didn't show it to us for pacing's sake.
We have some historical revisionism, as you mentioned. This episode pretends like the characters were always saying, sit on it. I think it starts very definitively in season 3, where everybody starts saying it. And more retconning, Ralph and Potsy, well, initially cowardly, do turn out to be loyal friends to Richie. Again, in seasons 1 and 2, they're pretty worthless to Richie and will sell him down the river for pretty much anything.
Yeah, and in season 1, Ralph wasn't really their friend.
Speaking of the Falcons, though, that was a nice jacket you had there, Fonz. You shouldn't have just left it in an alley. You could have had it customized to say something else or given it to charity or something. It just seems like a waste of a really nice jacket.
Yeah, it's like made of real leather. Come on, dude.
This origin story, though, for Fonzie and Richie definitely becomes canon. They even talk about it in Passages Part 2. There's a scene where Fonzie says to Richie,
10 years ago, when we first met, I was going to pound you in some alley, huh?
Yeah.
And here we are at your sister's wedding.
That definitely becomes canon in the series. The last thing I had to say was Fonzie makes a comment about cheerleaders.
Yeah.
This is definitely a high school pep rally. All the kids going to it are the high school kids. Richie says he's too old to go to it. Oh, God, I just realized Joni is one of those cheerleaders.
Yeah! What was that? That tag was bad, and the writer should feel bad.
Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in this episode?
For me, my favorite one was the return of Ralph Mouth's Ralph on the front, Mouth on the back shirt, and the little cap that he would wear sometimes back in the early days. And of course, this is a great episode for snazzy gang jackets. The Lords, it's more of a leather vest. The sleeves have been cut off, and it says Lords on the front lapel and on the back, and it looks really cool. And of course, the Falcon jacket is more of a classic leather jacket with Falcons spelled out on the back and this really neat matching cap. This is a good episode if you like gang fashion. I feel like real gangs don't actually wear because they're like expensive and stuff.
The gangs on Happy Days are so well dressed because they have access to the Paramount costume department and they have wardrobe people making them look great. There's a short film that they showed on Mystery Science Theater 3000 called What About Juvenile Delinquency, where there is also a teenage gang and they sew patches onto their existing jackets to show that they're members of the gang. And the patches look really crappy.
That makes sense.
Because they wouldn't have the money and resources to make nice looking jackets for themselves. So I compare it to the costume party episodes, of which Happy Days has quite a few. The Happy Days gang go to a lot of costume parties and the costumes always look great. They always fit. They're always tailored to the actors. They look exactly like what they're supposed to look like. You never get any crappy half-assed costumes. It's the miracle of having the Paramount costume department at your disposal. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old, timeless question. Was this episode any good?
Absolutely. I think that this is a very satisfying first meeting for Richie and Fonzie, even if I feel like it didn't happen exactly as Richie portrayed it. I don't think he and Fonzie immediately became friends afterwards, but I do like that Richie was basically able to talk Fonzie out of being in a gang, and I think that from the beginning that shows that Fonzie on some level did respect Richie and was able to acknowledge when Richie made good points. That's just a great origin for a friendship. I wanted to beat you up, and instead you talked me out of being in a gang. So, yeah. Aside from the tag at the ending, this episode is a lot of fun, and I loved seeing Marcia again.
I like this episode a whole lot, too. It was great being able to revisit the early days of the series. There really are distinct eras of Happy Days already, and we can already look back on the very earliest days of the show. It's great getting some insight into the Fonzie-Richie relationship and why it's so important to Fonzie, especially. I liked getting all that insight into their relationship. I liked revisiting celebrating the pre-Chachi days of the show. I always like when they have fake gang members on Happy Days. And of course, we get a cameo by Marcia Sims. So there is a whole lot to like in this episode. As for that tag, it might very well get edited out of many versions of the episode.
Which is probably for the best.
So, Peter, tell the people how they can keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing.
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, it's a very special episode with a very special guest star. And I don't mean Robin Williams. Well, I do mean Robin Williams, but I also mean the very special returning guest who will be joining us for my favorite Orkin.
Oh, it sounds like a real classic in the making. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Sophomores. Cute.